Shabbat Shalom. This is the Daniel study. We're going to Daniel chapter 7. But before we get into Daniel chapter 7, we're going to look through at the last portion of Daniel chapter 2. I want to kind of recap because I wasn't around last week, or I was late last week, so we didn't get a chance to recap. So we saw that the first dream of Nebuchadnezzar was the statue of a man, and he had different elements, gold, silver, brass, iron, and then there was an iron mixed with clay element in the last portion. Then it goes into saying that the Nebuchadnezzar was the king or the head of gold. And I think this is just explaining that each element, Daniel explained each element was going to be more inferior than the last. So let's go to Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 2, looking at verse 37 to 39, 37 to 40, 37 to 40. Daniel chapter 2, verse 37 to 40. And he says, "You, O king, are the king of kings, for Elohim of heaven have given you a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field, the fowls of heaven, have he given into your hand, and have made you a ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. After you shall arise another kingdom inferior to you, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdue all things, and as iron that breaks all these shall it break in pieces and bruise." I'm going to read So we see these three elements. The first element was gold, representing Nebuchadnezzar, or representing the kingdom of Babylon. And the other elements after it represents more inferior kingdoms that will rise up afterwards. So I'm going to ask you guys a question. According to scripture, matter of fact, according to the book of Daniel, we see later on who the silver is, which was a more inferior kingdom than gold. So the next kingdom was what? Does anybody know which kingdom that was?
Medio-Persia.
Medio-Persia, yes. Medio-Persia, the Medes and the Persians. We see this in Daniel chapter 5 when the handwriting was on the wall. So hey, Brother Rick, welcome. So we're going over the dream in Daniel chapter 2, and we're looking at the elements, which kingdom they were. So the gold was the kingdom of Babylon. The silver was the kingdom of Medio-Persia. It says that there will arise a more inferior kingdom than you. It will rise up after you. And we see in the book of Daniel that Medio-Persia came and took over Babylon while Daniel was still there. Matter of fact, it was Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, Belshazzar, that was doing blaspheming Yah, and taking the items out of the temple and using it for his own godly dedications. And then a hand was written on the wall. It says, "Many, many tekel upharsin." This is all in Daniel chapter 5. So in Daniel chapter 5, it shows that that their time has been up, and that Yah was delivering their kingdom into the hands of the Medes and the Persians. You can see that in Daniel chapter 5. Daniel chapter 5, verse 27 and 28. It says, "Tekel, you are weighed in the balances and are found lacking." And 28, "Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians." So we see that in verse 31, it says, "And Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old," or that's 62 years old. So we see that the next kingdom of silver is the Medes and the Persians. This kingdom actually rules for a duration period of time in the scriptures, like we have during the book of during the book of Ezra, during the book of Nehemiah, um, the book of Esther, especially Ezra and the book of Nehemiah, which is very prophetic because it was the kingdom of Persia that actually sent Israel back to Jerusalem, or sent Judah back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple and the wall and the street, according to the prophecies, which we're going to see in Daniel chapter 9, 8 and 9. So this is very important because the timeline is bringing us all the way to where we're supposed to be. So let's go back to Daniel chapter 2, because this is very important for us to grasp and not reinvent. What I see a lot of people doing online and is reinventing the meaning of a timeline. And I think that there's a lot of scripture, that a lot of prophecies pertaining to scenarios and situations in which has like a double meaning, or sometimes even a triple meaning. But when we're talking about time and prophecy, in which Yah is causing a certain thing to occur during history, to reinvent that, it's kind of like stepping over our boundaries. Like we don't deal with time. We don't deal with those elements. Yah deals with time, and he tells us what time it is. He tells us, what time is going to occur, how it's going to occur, when it's going to occur. So when he tells us that the next element or kingdom is silver, that's the next element or kingdom after Babylon or Nebuchadnezzar, which was Medio-Persia. But here's the interesting thing that I want us to recognize, because once we go down the elements, then we're going to understand what part are we in at this moment. It says that after it goes down to iron, it's going to go down to a portion in which iron is attempting to mingle with clay. So Daniel chapter 2, let's go to Daniel chapter 2. We're looking at verse 40, 41, verse 40 to 43. Verse 40 to 43. And it says here, Daniel 2, verse 40 to 43, the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, for as much as iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things, and as iron that breaks all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. Whereas you saw the feet and the toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron. The kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it the strength of iron. The strength of iron shall be in this mingled portion of history or kingdom. For as much as you saw that the iron was mixed with miry clay, and as the toes of the feet were part iron and part clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. So we have gold, silver, brass, iron, and then we have iron and clay. So we're going to be able to identify where are we at this point in time. We know, looking at the signs of the times, looking at how everybody is coming to Torah, how people are waking up to recognize Torah and things like that. Check out this verse in verse 44 and for verse 45. In this dream, the statue, a stone was cut out of a mountain without hands, and it hit the stone at the feet, and it grinded up the whole entire the statue. The stone hit the statue at the feet, and it grinded up the whole statue. And look at what it says here. In verse 43 and 44, it says, whereas you saw iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. We're going to talk about this more in Revelation, because Revelation talks a lot about Yah causing the nations to hate the harlot and to burn her with fire. So there's this working together, and then there's this conflict just amongst themselves. But looking at verse 44, it says, in the days of these kings shall the Elohim of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it break in pieces the iron, brass, clay, silver, and gold. The great God have made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the kingdom is certain, the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof is sure. So, with that being said, we know that each element is a different kingdom that appeared in history, which we see not only in, you could look at regular history as well as biblical history, scriptural history, which should be most important to us. At the end, there's going to be a kingdom set up at the time of the feet. This kingdom will be set up at the time of the feet's kingdom, and will grind up the entire statue at the feet, at the place where the feet is. So this kingdom is going to be set up at the last kingdom of the statue. This is very important for us to grasp, because this is the last kingdom of history. It says that the stone, after the stone hits the feet, which is mixed with iron and clay, it grows into a mountain that fills the whole earth. Earlier in Daniel chapter 2, it says in verse 35, then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, became like the chaff of the summer threshing floor, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So we see that the time of this stone is being set up during the last portion of history, the last kingdom's existence in history. So when this kingdom is being set up, Yah's kingdom is being set up at the same time. When these iron is trying to mix with clay and they're not mixing, Yah's is setting up a kingdom that's going to basically consume what's going on. And then after it consumes these nations, then it grows into a mountain that fills the whole earth. Go ahead, Emeka.
Yeah, so I was thinking, is it safe to, because I've been thinking a lot about, the kingdom that's coming and stuff like that. So we know that this kingdom, is it safe to say this kingdom is going to be a nation as well? Because, thinking of that, how we see how one nation was taken over by another nation taken over by another nation taken over by another. Right. Is it possible, that when, this stone, when it comes, which, we all would say that's, the return of Messiah or Mashiach, when he returns, is it safe to say, like, it's going to be in the form of a nation, like he's going to, okay, there's going to be a nation, you know what I'm saying? Like there's going to be a nation that maybe, and I don't know, as far as your thoughts on reincarnation, but, scripture does speak a little bit about reincarnation. So just, a question I had, but I don't want to go too deep, but is it safe to say that a nation is going to arise, the nation of Yah, or the nation of Messiah, or, Israel will arise and begin to consume, or begin to dominate the other nations, or, as Yahuwah said, he will have them above. Is it safe to say that another nation will rise up, which is the true Israel?
Well, it depends on what you mean. Like you mean like a set up nation in an actual place, like in which they have like a location in which they have a nation, right? That's what you're talking about?
Yeah, more so like, yeah, maybe there's an origin of nation, there's an origin, or I would say one nation, and maybe it begins to grow, and the other, like kind of consuming other nations until, it's Yah's, under Yah's authority and it kind of grows and begins to absorb other nations. I don't know if that makes sense.
Right. Well, to correlate both Daniel and Revelation is very important as well, because Daniel is taking us to the last portion of time, and Revelation is focusing on the last portion of time. You see what I'm saying? So however Revelation describes the nations during the time of Yah's people, and as well as Matthew 24, because you have to understand that kingdom shall rise against kingdom, nation against nation, and they're going to persecute Yah's people, just like how they did in the book of Acts. But how they did in the book of Acts, when the nation of Rome continued to persecute Yah's people, they continued to gain more people to follow Yah. So this actually weakened the nation of Rome to the point where they had to heighten the punishment, throw them in jail, kill them, throw them to the lions. At first, it wasn't so. They wasn't throwing them to the lions until they started to develop more of an impact on the people coming to Yah. So you could look at the book of Acts, you'll see centurions, you see Phoenicians, you see all these different nations leaving the following after the Caesar or Rome or the Roman ideal and following after Yah. This is what agitated the nations to try to destroy the people of Yah, because they were affecting the government of Rome when they started to get these people to follow Yah instead of to follow Caesar. So what Yah is going to do, when you look at scripture, everything is restored. When he cuts the stone, when you look at Daniel 2, he cuts a stone out of the mountain, and that stone hits the feet is the kingdom. And then after these nations are consumed, then it grows and fills the whole earth. I think this is very important. He's not going to set up an actual nationality according to scripture. He's going to utilize a piece of a mountain to consume the statue. Then after they're consumed, according to Daniel 2, it grows and fills the whole earth into an actual nation that kind of basically runs the world. Go ahead, America.
Okay, nah, I like that. So looking at that, right? Okay, so we know a mountain is you tied into spiritually. A mountain is tied into a nation, right?
Right.
So he's cutting off at the top of a mountain, right?
Yep,
Would it be safe to say that he cut off Jerusalem, because we know that, number one, we've seen how he severed Jerusalem after after Messiah's ascension, death and resurrection and his ascension. And so we know that they were scattered, and someone could say they were thrown into all the nations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yasharal, Israel, was thrown into all the nations. Is it safe to say that those same being thrown into all the nations, once they came to the knowledge of who they were, and the knowledge to Torah, that they were what triggers the nations to begin to be brought down or destroyed, them being thrown into the nations? Because, I'm just connecting, that cutting off of the mountains with the nations. And then we know, since, you're talking about the stone being thrown now, I'm thinking, okay, what if those that were cut off are the actual stone that was thrown into, this Roman church and state,
Well, also when we're looking at prophecy as well, which is good to kind of collect those ideas. There's a certain time frame in which those things occur as well. Every dream that occurred, even in the book of Genesis, the Pharaoh, when he had a dream, the seven cows, the seven represented very detailed the timing. Each cow represented a different year. So when you're looking at the statue, each element represents a different time frame in which a different kingdom was ruling. The stone was thrown at the foot, meaning that whatever is happening, it hasn't happened during the time of Babylon, Persia, Greece. We're just going to say it, Greece, Rome. It happens at the end when Rome and the clay is trying to attempt to mingle. That's when the stone is going to hit. The stone is going to be hitting the feet. So each element is a time period in history. The stone is cut out of the mountain, so it's not a mountain itself. It's cut out of a mountain, but it's a kingdom. Even though it's not a mountain, it's a kingdom. When the stone hits the feet, it's telling you what part of time is this kingdom going to be set up to consume the nations. So if we're looking at the idea that, talking about Israel sent to all the nations, they were sent to all the nations before the feet. They were sent to all the nations, during the iron, during the silver. They were sent to all the nations multiple times. So when you're looking at the statue, it's telling you exactly where in history is this stone going to appear. The stone is going to appear during the time of the foot, which is the last time. This is when the stone will begin to consume the nations. Then after it consumes the nations, it begins to grow and fill the whole earth. When you look at Revelation, when we go through the book of Revelation, it's going to coincide with, we're going to continue to cross-reference, and we're going to see them both connect with what Yah's people is supposed to be doing during the time that iron is trying to mix with clay. So as far as saying that focusing and emphasizing on a specific nationality, it just emphasizes on Yah's kingdom, which we know that Yah's kingdom doesn't really necessarily emphasize on only one nationality, because many nationalities have joined Israel, and many nationalities have become as one that was born in Israel. So it's kind of hard to kind of separate a certain type of people when it just says kingdom. You know what I mean? You would have to, at this point in time, you would have to kind of, with Daniel chapter 2, you would have to assume it's talking about the entire emphasis of Yah's kingdom, not necessarily a specific group or party or people. It's his entire kingdom that's being set up at this point in time in history. And we're going to talk later about the reincarnation thing.
All right, cool. Sounds good.
All right. Brother Nathaniel, go ahead, brother.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I was doing some, I've been waiting for this, study. I'm kind of glad that last week, we had some delay in it, because last week I was a little busy also. So I was doing some research on this, just some scriptures. So Zechariah 3, 8, and 9. Now listen, Yahusha, the high priest, you and your companions who sit before you, for they are men of symbol. That word that the King James uses as wondered at, as a sign or a token, or it says also here in Strong's an omen, miracle, right? H4159. They are men of symbol. They are men of an omen, men of a sign. For look, I am bringing forth my servant, the branch. And then Zechariah 3:9. See the stone which I have put before Yahusha. On one stone are 7 eyes. See, I am engraving its inscription. We see that again in Revelation chapter 5, talking about that with 7 eyes. Revelation 5:6. 5:5 and 6. And one of the elders said to me, do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Yehudah, the root of David, overcame to overcome the scroll to loosen its 7 seals. And I looked and saw in the midst of the throne of the 4 living creatures, in the midst of the elders, a lamb, having been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 Ruach of Elohim sent out into all the earth. And so, as we know, I mean, I'm a little bit ahead, but just bear with me. As we know in Daniel chapter 7 through maybe 14, we see 7:13 and 14 talk about the Son of Man coming in the clouds. Revelation 7:9 talks about the Ancient of Days sitting in the throne. So Daniel 7:9 about the Ancient of Days sitting in the throne matches with Revelation chapter 4. And then Daniel chapter 7 verse 13 and 14 match with Revelation chapter 5. We see the Son of Man coming in the clouds, and then the kingdom given to him. And so we see. I just see like basically Zechariah chapter 3, Revelation chapter 4 and 5, Daniel chapter 7 9 through 13, and then Daniel chapter 2, 40, what is that, 43 through 45, or 44 and 45 specifically. They're all talking about the same, they're all talking about the same events, essentially, is what they're talking about. And so, we talk about this stone, being cut without man's hands. And I agree with you that the stone is are the people, but we also, kind of the last thing I'll share is we know that yahusha is called the chief cornerstone, right? Ephesians 2:20. Having been built upon the foundation of the emissaries and prophets, Yahusha Messiah himself being a chief cornerstone. You can't be a chief stone without there being other stones. 2 Peter 2:5, we are living stones, and then there's the chief stone. So the stone cut without man's hands, I find that to be Messiah specifically. And even though he is the chief stone, I do agree that there are other stones, that are in that nation, and, not to take away with what you said, but just to kind of, add to that, because he's called a chief cornerstone. So Zechariah chapter 3, he's called a stone with 7 eyes, which matches with the lamb with 7 horns and 7 eyes. Here we call him, Ephesians 2:20, he's a chief cornerstone, as we are stones. So I think that, specifically the one cut without man's hands, I just see that as saying like only begotten, cut without, the hands of man, but I just kind of wanted to share those scriptures. I don't know if you have looking into Zechariah 3, matching with Daniel 7 and then Revelation 4 and 5 or not.
Well, yeah, we're about to go into Daniel 7.
Right.
Now, I don't see the connection, even though it's using similarities of words, because it interprets it in Daniel 2. It says it's a kingdom. So it'll be, there's a lot of things, especially in prophecy, using the same terminologies. It calls us stones. Peter calls us stones as well. But the stone, just because we're stones doesn't mean we're the chief cornerstone.
No. He's the chief cornerstone.
Right. No, I think we all understand that. It's just a matter of putting verses together. Just because it says stone or just because it uses similar references is not necessarily how it connects, but the context is how it should connect.
But the context is perfectly there. Zechariah 3 is the men of symbol.
Wait, one second.
Yeah. Okay.
You mentioned every point already, brother. Let's go look at Daniel chapter 2, and we're gonna just leave Daniel chapter 2 the way Daniel chapter 2 says it. We're not gonna try to expound on it. We're gonna go to Daniel chapter 7 afterwards, but we're gonna leave Daniel chapter 2 the way it interprets it, because Daniel interprets it in the same chapter. So we don't have to now create another idea to add to it. We just have to leave it alone until the prophets tell us otherwise later on. So when we're looking at Daniel, and you said you agreed. So when you're looking at Daniel chapter 2, verse 44 and 45, it says, "In the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It, the kingdom, shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as you saw the stone cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it break into pieces, the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, the gold, talking about the kingdoms, the great God have made known unto the king what shall come to pass hereafter. So it's literally using the same terminologies. Daniel is literally taking you back to the dream so you can understand the interpretation. He's saying the kingdom is going to break into pieces and consume it, and then the kingdom shall stand forever, just as you saw the stone breaking everything into pieces. So he's basically giving you the interpretation of what the stone is, and he's not saying anything else. Daniel 7, he goes into seeing the Son of Man and the Ancient of Days, and it goes a little bit more elaborate on something that we're going to see when we read Daniel 7. But as far as Daniel 2,
so does a king have
the stone is the kingdom.
Does the kingdom have a king? Does a kingdom have a king?
Sure.
So a chief cornerstone. So a kingdom has. We can understand that a kingdom does have a king. Then we can agree on that.
Of course, a kingdom has to have a king, or it's not a kingdom.
Who is the kingdom? Who is the king of that kingdom?
Is Messiah.
Okay, and so that would be a stone cut without the hands of man. You think that a kingdom has a king? You just said that, right?
But we got to move forward. But it doesn't say that. It's very specific.
But okay, we can move forward then, as long as you recognize that a kingdom has a king. Thank you.
No problem. It's very, very specific. It's only 2 verses. It gives you everything that you need to see in those things, in those verses. So let's move forward. So we see the elements. We have the gold, the silver, and we just read in Daniel chapter 5 that the silver, or the next or the following kingdom that arose, was Medo-Persia. So now let's go to Daniel chapter 7. Now, Daniel chapter 7 has 28 verses. So if somebody could read the first 7 verses.
I can if you'd like me to.
Yeah, go ahead, Brother Rick.
In the first year of Belshazzar, the king of Babel, Daniel had a dream and vision of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spoke and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of the Shamayim strove upon the great sea. And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made to stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second, like a bear, and it was raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. And after this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl, and the breast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it.
That was verse 6. You can read verse 7.
I thought I did finish 7, didn't I?
No, you read verse.
I'm sorry. Okay, my bad. After this I saw in the night vision, and beheld a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke into pieces, and stamped the remnant of the feet of it. And it was diversed from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns.
You wanna mention anything there, Rick, brother Rick?
Well, sounds like some freaky beasts that it's describing there that I don't think I've ever beheld, but you know, it's interesting when you start putting all of these different aspects of the animals and what do they represent in here, you know, and speaking of their teeth, basically, so what they're devouring, what they're chewing on, you know, they're going after to destroy some things of this earth. So I think it's just, you know, you're seeing a representation of some different strengths of these different animals, different aspects of the animals that we should be able to relate to in a spiritual sense, I think, more than we would in a physical, because I don't know all these different aspects go together in any creatures that we're familiar with, you know, but other than the aspects of the parts, like the heads and the teeth and those things. So I'm interested to find out more detail and allow, you know, us to expound upon this more, but there's a lot here to chew on.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And I kind of want to start from the beginning, because these elements of prophecy reoccurs in different areas. And one of the main principles of scripture is line upon line, precept upon precept. The prophets are subject to the prophets, you know. So when it says certain things, like in verse 2, it says, behold, the four winds of heaven strove upon the great sea. The four winds of heaven. The four winds of heaven is usually referring to all the nations of the earth, or the nations of the earth. There's multiple times that four winds, if you do like a word search of four winds, you'll see that he talks about scattering Israel to the four winds, referring to scattering them to the nations. You'll see that in Jeremiah, and Ezekiel talks about it. In Jeremiah 49, verse 36, it says, upon Elam will I bring the four winds from the four quarters of heaven, and will scatter them toward all those winds. And there shall be no nation whither the outcasts of Elam shall not come. So winds is referring to nations. And he says that these nations from the four corners of the earth is going to come, and they will be scattered to those winds, or those nations. So it says they shall be scattered to those winds, and there shall be no nation in which they will not be scattered to. So that's Jeremiah 49, verse 36. And so it's very important for us to understand the four winds of heaven strove, fought, warred upon the great sea. And the great sea, which we're going to see beasts rising out of the sea represents some multitudes, tongues, according to Revelation, I believe is Revelation 17. If anybody knows where that is, just to reference. So in Revelation 17, it says that the beast that rose out of the sea represents multitudes, nations, tongues, and people. So when it says that the four winds strove against the great sea, it's saying that there was multitudes of nations striving amongst a multitude of people. And during those strivings, it says here, four beasts came up from the sea, different from one another. So as war amongst the nations occurred, certain kingdoms rose up to power. All right, I want to simplify this as simple as possible. So as the nations of the earth warred one with another, amongst the multitude of the people on the earth rose four different kingdoms or empires on this earth. The first one was like a lion with eagle's wings, and I beheld, we're going to look at verse 4, and I beheld the wings that thereof were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. These are talking about different elements of this lion, right? Different portions. The first vision of this lion is that the lion is there with eagle's wings. Let's look at Jeremiah, because I want to make this very clear, because like I said, there's a lot of ideas going around of reinterpreting the actual beasts in Daniel 7 and as well as the elements in Daniel 2, instead of leaving it as it is to bring us to the place that we are right now. Instead, when you reinterpret history, now nobody knows where we are in history. We're unsure what's going to be the next step. We're unsure what's going to happen. But when we see prophecy as stable, this is not going to change until it's fulfilled. Then we have to wait. Then we have to locate where we are in history. So here it talks about the lion. In scripture, it describes a kingdom as a lion. Does anybody know a verse, or just simply everybody know what kingdom was referred to as a lion?
Yahuda.
Well, Yahuda was referred to as a lion, yes.
The other one.
But not
England in these days, yeah.
Right. But not a kingdom that rose out of the multitudes of the earth. See, Judah didn't rise out of a war that occurred with the four winds of the sea. Judah didn't rise out of that. Israel didn't rise out of that.
A Gentile nation, that would probably more.
It would be a Gentile. It would definitely would be
British,
a Gentile.
I think, is represented by the lion, yeah?
Right, definitely.
The eagle's wings represents, because we came out of that too, so those have.
Oh yeah. Eagle's wings is eagle's wings. You're right. You're absolutely right. But there's a reference that this nation had eagle's wings. So we're gonna see how this nation, which came from a Gentile nation, remember the four winds, and rose out of a multitude of the sea from the nations. Yah, of course, everybody knows the eagle's wings is Yah's movement, moved his lion. So who's the lion? Nathaniel and then Brother Shaw.
Real quick, back to that. The reason I mentioned Yehuda is because I'm seeing the miry clay, yeah? That's mixed with the iron. So when you're mixed in with the multitude, I'm seeing the clay there maybe as a representative somewhat of Yahuwah's people, you know, that he's molded and brought out and mixed together there as he scattered them. You know, I mean,
here's a crazy thing about Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 line up. They line up because remember there's four elements and then there's four beasts. There's a fifth element, but it's mingled with the fourth element. So there's four elements and then there's four beasts. Scripture describes kingdoms as beasts as well, which we're gonna see as well. But we're gonna let me let Nathaniel go ahead, Brother Nathaniel, and then Brother Shaw.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. The lion. I mean, on the Ishtar gate of Babylon, you see a lion with eagle's wings plastered all over that. I think you're probably, you can connect that. I'm sure you're going to go into Daniel 4 about the heart of a man, in the beast. But I would say the lion is Babylon from what I see.
The lion is Babylon. I agree, but we're gonna prove it. I definitely agree, and yeah, I am gonna go into Daniel 4, or you could go into Daniel 4 when we get to that part. Brother Shaw, you wanted to say something, bro?
Shabbat Shalom, brothers.
Shabbat Shalom.
We just came back in off the road. Sorry I'm late.
No problem.
I want to apologize for that, but I know you guys got everything going. All right, getting back on subject. Yes, when you look at chapter 7, you're going to pick out lion. You're going to pick out eagle wings. You're going to see bear. And you're going to see leopard. And you're going to say, like you're asking, brother, the brother's asking, rabbi is asking, he's saying, what nations? So you go back in time, you're going to find out that England also had, for example, lions, and they also had leopards on the insignia. Of course, the United States, they have an eagle. And of course, the Soviet Union, when it was intact, they adopted the bear, and they still do. They still, under Russia, had that insignia, the bear. So if you go back, you'll see the eagle in the United States, of course, and you also see the lion. If you take the England insignia, you have the insignia of a lion and also of leopards. You see that too. Going back to chapter 2 in Daniel, when the kingdom, the feet, when you had the clay and iron, of course, they were scattered kingdoms. As we see today, there's the United States, world power, there's Russia, world power, there's China, world power. When you start looking at the history of these nations, you can see these animals representing these countries, even China. You can see that. So how the brothers are going to tie this together and make us understand, I'm very, very interested to see. But we do see clearly the eagle with the United States of America. We clearly see the lion with what the England's, Great Britain, the England did. And also on one of their shields, you see 3 lions, but also that can be interpreted as 3 leopards. Plus, you've got the bear. There's no mistaking who that is. So I'm just going to sit back and enjoy this ride and see where you lead us tonight, brother.
All right. So Jeremiah chapter 4. We're going to look at Jeremiah chapter 4 first. It says that this lion had eagle's wings. I'm not sure if I can tie in England having eagle's wings as far as Yah leading that nation, because eagle's wings in scripture is specific. We're let out of Egypt on eagle's wings. We're gonna kind of put all those pieces together so we can know where it wouldn't be, you know. But
remember Germany now. Germany had eagle too. So
yeah, right. Multiple actual nations had eagles. Even
Egypt too,
like
Bill.
you said, multiple nations. But Daniel, where Daniel was taking us is to from a point in time of a nation, and in later on in Daniel 7, I think Brother Nathaniel brought it up earlier. He brings us to the judgment books. So again, he brings us from the beginning of a nation, and then another nation, another nation, another nation, and this last nation begins to blaspheme and wear out Yah's holy ones, and the books are open and judgment begins for this last beast. So again, we're given a timeline in which one happens, another one happens, another one happens, another one happens, and then judgment happens. So he's given us another timeline or another period of time that's happening.
Right. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So
Yeah.
like the Romans had the eagle.
Mm-hmm.
So we can clearly see that. Roman Empire with the eagle. We can still see it.
Right.
Then,
Iran has the lion too.
Well, let's look at this. Let's look at now. It doesn't say it's an eagle. It says it's a lion. So it's not an eagle. It just has eagle's wings. The description of having eagle's wings, like we said, only in scripture refers to Yahuah utilizing this nation. When he says, I brought you out on eagle's wings, it means I'm the one that by my power and strength, I brought you to this place. So eagle's wings is not eagle. Eagle's wings is just wings of an eagle. That's it. It's on a lion. So now the lion is the actual beast that needs to be emphasized. The lion. So let's look at scripture. Jeremiah 4, verse 6 and 7. It says, set up a standard towards Zion, retire, stay not, for I will bring evil from the north and great destruction. The lion is come up from his thicket. The destroyer of the nations is on his way. He has gone forth from his place to make your land desolate, and your cities shall be laid waste without inhabitant. Does anybody know what Jeremiah was? Who was Jeremiah? I'm sorry? Somebody said something?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Where was that, Jeremiah?
Babylon.
Jeremiah 4, verse 6 and 7.
Babylon.
Right. Yahuah calls Babylon, which in Revelation we still see a kingdom referred to as Babylon, in Revelation. So we see the combination. We don't have to figure it out. Yah's gonna point us right to it. Now I believe United States is in scripture, but we're gonna have to get to Revelation on that one. But we see the lion. Yahuwah calls the lion, calls Babylon the lion directly. He also calls the lion. He uses multiple animal descriptions in Jeremiah chapter 5, verse 6 as well. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 5, verse 6. Jeremiah 5, verse 6, it says, wherefore a lion out of the forest shall slay them. Who is he talking about? Who is he telling Jeremiah is going to come and slay the people? This is for Jerusalem not repenting. The lion that's coming to slay them is Babylon. Then he says here, a leopard shall watch over their cities. Everyone that goes out of there shall be torn in pieces. I forgot, I mentioned the wolf. Sorry, the wolf. And the wolf of the evening shall spoil them. It says, a leopard shall watch over their cities. Everyone that goes out from there shall be torn to pieces, because their transgressions are many and their backslidings are increased. And then he says in verse 7, which there's a lot of elements that goes to Revelation and Daniel 7. It says, how shall I pardon you for this? Your children have forsaken me and sworn by them that are no gods. When I have fed them to be full, they then committed adultery and assembled themselves by troops in the harlot's house. We see a harlot in Revelation 17:18. The harlot is riding the beast. We see in Revelation a harlot. So like I said, Daniel is going to connect us to Revelation. Daniel, at the end of Daniel chapter 12, it was a book that was sealed until a certain times of prophecy was fulfilled. Then it was going to be revealed after that time of prophecy is fulfilled, meaning that it was going to connect. Daniel chapter, Revelation 10, you have John opening a scroll that was closed, and the angel told him to eat the scroll and to prophesy again. So we see that there's a book that was closed in Revelation is being opened. So Daniel closes it, John opens it. So we're going to combine Daniel and Revelation together, because we're looking at a lion, bear, leopard, and then some other type of beasts. When we get to Revelation 13, we see one beast with the mouth of a lion, feet of a bear, body of a leopard. You see? So we have the same elements in Revelation 13, the same elements in Daniel chapter 7. Now, so let's go back. So the lion that Yah sends is Babylon. Why does this lion have eagle's wings, you say? How is Yah leading this nation? You say, I think I heard Brother Rick say it in his mind. So Daniel chapter 2, like we read before, what did Daniel tell Nebuchadnezzar? What did he verse 37, what did he tell Nebuchadnezzar? He said, you, O king, are king of kings, because Elohim of heaven have given you a kingdom, power, and strength, and a glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field, the fowls of heaven, have he given into your hand, and have made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. So who is leading Babylon at this point? Somebody, anybody, scream. Somebody.
Nebuchadnezzar.
Right. Yah has given this to him. Matter of fact, we see in Jeremiah that Yah has called him to come from the north to discipline Israel, and said that he's a lion coming because of his power and glory given to him.
Yeah.
Eagle's wings.
Right.
Now we're on the same kingdom. This now we got Nebuchadnezzar, on eagle's wings, when was his wings plucked off?
When
when
he
did?
exalted himself.
Oh, yes.
I mean,
When he exalted himself, he was plucked down. And what does it say in Daniel 7? It says that his wings, in verse 4, till his wings were plucked, and it was lifted up, and it was lifted up from earth and made to stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to him. Anybody knows what happened to Nebuchadnezzar? When he was plucked off, what happened to him? He was on all fours.
feet
And then,
eating
He
like
went
a
crazy.
wild animal.
Yah,
Fingernails.
right. What did Yah do after that? Yah raised him up, gave him
Yeah.
a heart of a man, and he started
Right.
to glorify Yah.
Right.
See that? Let's go to Daniel chapter 4. This is what Nathaniel is probably shaking, wanting us to get to. Daniel chapter 4. This is all the way at the end. Look at this description right here. We're gonna start at 32, right? No, we're gonna start at 31. No, we're gonna start at 30. Let's start at 30. It says, and the king spake and said, is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might and of my power, for the honor of my majesty? What did Daniel just tell him in chapter 2? He says, Yah gave you the power and the glory for everybody to be under you. You have Nebuchadnezzar saying, me. Watch this. It says in verse 31, while the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from you, and they shall drive you from men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make you to eat grass upon oxen. 7 times shall pass over you, meaning 7 years, until you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he will. Watch this description. The same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from men. He ate grass as oxen. His body was wet with the dew of heaven till his hairs were grown like eagle's feathers and his nails like bird's claws. It says his hair was like eagle's feathers, like not eagle's wings. That was plucked off. It was just, his hair was just like feathers, and he was just sweat. He was like an animal. But then it says in verse 34, at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes. The lion was lifted up my eyes unto heaven, and my understanding returned to me, the heart. Remember, the heart and the mind is the same thing. I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him that lives forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing, and he does according to his will in the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth none can stay his hand or say unto him, what are you going to do? So we see here Nebuchadnezzar is given another heart. He had this boastful heart. He was brought to his knees. Then he was lifted up and given the heart. And it says that he would take out the stony heart. This is Ezekiel 36. He would take out the stony heart, and he would give us a heart of flesh. He would give us a soft heart. This is what Nebuchadnezzar has done. This is what the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar has done. Look at what he says to his kingdom in verse 36 of Daniel 4. At the time my reason returned unto me. Remember, mind and heart is the same thing in scripture. When it says heart was given to him, he was talking about his mind. It says, at the same time my reason returned unto me, for the glory of my kingdom, my honor and brightness returned to me, and my counselors, my masters sought unto me, and I was established in my kingdom, and excellent majesty was added unto me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, pray and extol and honor the King of Shamaim, all whose works are true, and his ways judgment, and those that walk in pride he is able to abase. So now he's a different type of guy. Unfortunately, we don't see it in his son, because we don't even hear about his son, because his grandson is the one that tries to worship idols in the very next chapter and have that kingdom taken. So we can clearly see Nebuchadnezzar change man, but when he changed, you can't pass that. You can't pass the ruach down. They have to choose it, and we clearly see that not his son, but his grandson have blasphemed Yah and boasted himself, and he was humbled by his kingdom being taken away. Now watch the next beast. They were taken away. Babylon was taken over by the Medes and the Persians. What's the Medes and the Persians? Medes and the Persians are two actual kingdoms. They're actually two kingdoms. We're going to read about this in Daniel 8. We may have to cross-reference to Daniel 8 so we can understand this next beast. Right after Babylon came Medio-Persia. Look at what it describes. It says, and behold, this is verse 5. Another beast, a second, like a bear. It raised itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in his mouth between his teeth. And they said unto it, arise and devour much flesh. This is Daniel 7, verse 5. So it rose up on one side. So it's a bear on all fours, and it rose up on one side. So 2 sides, one side is higher than another, right? Let's look at Daniel chapter 8. Let's look at Daniel chapter 8. It says here, let's see. It talks about a ram with 2 horns. Verse 3. Daniel chapter 8, verse 3. It says, then I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. So there was 2 horns. One was higher than the other horn. Let's go down further in Daniel chapter 8. Daniel chapter 8, verse 20. What does it say the ram was? That one side was higher than another. Daniel chapter 8, verse 20, it says, the ram which you saw having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia. So we have the bear rising up on one side higher than another, and it had 3 ribs in his mouth, and it devoured much flesh. This is the kingdom of Media and Persia, which came directly after Babylon. The lion, Babylon, the bear with one side higher than another, matches with Daniel chapter 8. The ram with one side higher than another, Media and Persia, is the direct next kingdom. Now, because this kingdom has already existed, it doesn't break down the other kingdoms in the previous verses, but it does tell you the next kingdom. It's that was going at the ram with the 2 horns, one high side and another. Let's go back to Daniel chapter 7.
Yeah, the silver.
Right. So we have the gold, we have the silver, we have the lion, we have the bear, but then we also have the ram. So we have the silver, the bear, and the ram. They all line up parallel one to another. Now let's go to Daniel 7 again.
Shalom, Akuti, and Brohim. Thank you so much for viewing this video. We hope it was helpful to your walk in the truth. Remember to always search the scriptures on your own, to study Abba's word and show yourself approved, according to 2 Timothy 2:15. We invite you to study with us. To join us in a live study, just go to our website at assemblyofyahuah.com and click the Join Us tab. We have something available Wednesday through Saturday of every week. If you've been Baruch or blessed by this video today or any other study, we encourage you to go to the Giving tab on our website. Our elders all have their own ways of income, so none of the giving or proceeds go to them. Instead, it goes to biblical assembly needs. We also encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss any new videos. We sincerely pray that Abba continues to direct your path as you acknowledge Him in all your ways. Much avaha and again shalom.